So here's an interesting thing about driving change inside large organizations. It's very difficult to see like where people really are. Sometimes you see some people actively participating, some people not participating, and you actually have some people that are actively fighting against the change. But what's interesting is when you think about the people that are not participating in the change, you might think that they're against the change when they're for the change. And that's like a paradox that you have to deal with, because a lot of people inside large organizations are actually bystanders. They're waiting to see what happens before they jump in. So to get a sense of where people really are, you need to figure out a way of evaluating buy-in. And buy-in is composed of two things: evaluation and participation. When we talk about evaluation, we're talking about people's views about whether the change is a good thing or the right thing for the organization to actually be doing. So do they kind of like the change? Do they believe in the change? Do they support the change? When we're talking about participation, we're talking about whether people are willing to actively contribute to the change, either through advocating for it to others or actually kind of actively contributing to the activities that are happening around the change itself. And so when we say you have buy-in, right, you need to have both. You need to have a positive evaluation of the change and active participation. If you have one and not the other, then you don't really have buy-in. So what this allows us to do is that it actually allows us to map two dimensions. So when it comes to participation, you can have negative participation, that is people actively fighting against the change, or people doing nothing, being neutral. Or you can have actually positive participation, where people are actively contributing to the change in a positive way. And when it comes to evaluation, the same thing applies. You can have negative evaluation, where people do not like the change, and sometimes they express it and sometimes they don't. Or you can have people that are neutral, or you can have people that have a positive evaluation of the change. So once you have those two dimensions, what that actually means is you have 9 personas of change, right? And so this starts to throw up some really interesting personas. An interesting persona could be the prisoner, right? People who don't like the change, but are actively participating because of some kind of incentive. You could also have your saboteurs, right? They don't like the change and they're participating actively against the change, like they're negatively contributing to the change. Now, the really cool people are your champions, right? They have a positive evaluation of the change and they're actively contributing positively to make sure that the change actually works. And then maybe in one corner, you might have your objectors. They have a positive evaluation of the change, but they're not actively participating because maybe they don't like how the change is being done. So this takes us back to our bystanders. They're sitting right there in the middle of our 9 personas, and they're just watching and waiting, right? They're just watching and waiting. They want to see what's going to happen before they engage with the change itself. So when you think about your bystanders, you really have to think about what's going on in their minds. They're not against the change. They're just waiting to see what happens. And that's a really different space to be, because depending on how you engage with them, you can move them in either direction. You can move them to become a supporter, or you can move them to become a saboteur. So you have to be really careful in terms of how you engage with bystanders. And so the question is, what will make a bystander join the transformation or join the movement? What are they waiting to see? Well, they're waiting to see momentum. They're waiting to see the change start to have traction and produce positive results. They're waiting for social proof. Maybe other key important stakeholders, other key leaders coming out and publicly endorsing the change. And they're probably waiting for early wins and visible results that they can point to as a reason to jump in and start to participate. So it's really important when we're evaluating our stakeholders and we're mapping our stakeholders to really think about buy-in. You know, is it positive evaluation? Is it negative participation? Is it positive participation, negative evaluation? Or are they neutral on both dimensions and they're bystanders that are waiting to see what actually happens? And then we can engage each stakeholder in the right way in order to drive the change successfully.